one last kiss. Valentine's Day. I'll miss him. Today will be the last Valentine's Day with the man I love. So, I wanted to make it perfect for him. We'll watch the movies we used to watch, listen to our song, eat our favorite meal together, and reminisce about old times. Better times. He isn't who he used to be, and I know he can't help it. It wasn't his fault. Ever since the madness took him, he has not been himself. He craves flesh. Human flesh. No other flesh satisfies him anymore. It doesn't matter if he knew them from before or not. I have managed to find him homeless people who have died during the night. I felt guilty. They must have had families, and maybe, just maybe, I could have done something to help them. Instead, I cooked them up for him, seasoned it, and served it up to him on a plate. He took a bite, chewed and swallowed. Almost immediately he vomited and swore he would never do it again. But come midnight, he had the fridge door open and was gobbling it up. At first, he was able to keep it in check, maybe one person per year. But after a while, I had to find him more corpses to consume, and it was endless. He hated himself for it. It wasn't his fault. Neither of us could deal with the fact that he was forever changed. In order to protect our family and friends, we pushed them away and told them not to contact us. We decided to move into the woods so he wouldn't have to see people. If the temptation wasn't there, it would be easier to prevent any flare-ups. We had to protect them. That hunger was relentless, and I thought in time we would be able to overcome it together. He begged me to leave him, divorce, or just walk away, all in order to give me the chance of a normal life. He was always worried that one day he would try to kill me. How could I possibly do that to him? I love him, but not even our love could stop him. A month ago, I left to go to the store to pick up some items, and it was a long trip. By this point, we lived far away from the nearest town. When I got home, he didn't come to the car to greet me like normal. Instead, I found him on the dining room floor. His hands were coated red with blood. He was all hunched over, and the sound of him ripping and chewing. He tore at the meat with his teeth. The blood seeped down his chin and his eyes were bloodshot, in a complete frenzy. When he looked at me, for a moment I don't think he recognized who I was and gave a leering, animalistic grin before he went back to chewing on his prize. That chewing sound. It is a sound that will stay with me the rest of my life. Deep down I knew he had a break, a change. The blood was fresh. I didn't know who it was. Some hiker? I could tell by the boots and her clothing, what was left of it anyway. The hiker lay on her back. Her eyes gazed up into space, staring aimlessly the way the dead do. And in the pit of my stomach, I knew something had to be done about him. We ended up at this point because we used to do urban exploration. We used to do it on YouTube and had a moderately successful channel. Enough to earn a bit of money but not quit our jobs. We went into a house that was rumored to be haunted, and had been for a long time. There were deaths that occurred on Halloween, always on Halloween. And it was an extremely old house with a lot of history. The most recent death was said to be a girl. The neighbors said that the spirits never move on, and it had been abandoned for some time now. We never believed it, but for the views, we would hype it up anyway. We would say we saw something in the mirror, or caught a cold breeze, or even something tried to attack us. I don't know what happened to him. I was recording in the kitchen while he went upstairs into one of the bedrooms. He was only gone for 5, maybe 10 minutes at most, and I was alerted to him by a loud, terrified scream. I dropped my camera where I stood and I ran to him. He stepped out of the room, barely able to speak, and his hands were coated in blood. He kept pointing back, stammering, She. There was no one in there. On the drive back home, he wouldn't say what happened or what he saw. When he came back home, he would chew his fingernails and the cuticles down to the quick. Whenever I would look over at him, he would pick at his skin and eat it. He would wake up in a cold sweat and wouldn't tell me what had happened to him.
No. I don't want to. Leave me alone.
He would talk in his sleep.
No. I won't do it.
Sometimes he would growl or let out a madman's laugh. Most of the time, he would be moaning about how he needed to taste flesh.
I need to taste human flesh. Please.
Begging some unknown entity that he didn't want to do it. I would hold him, stroke his hair, kiss him. I'd tell him I loved him. I didn't care that he had become a monster. I'd love him. Always. The doctors couldn't help us. They gave us mixed answers to try to comfort us. It was useless, and they were clueless. People in our comment sections wanted to know why we weren't uploading anymore. We had no answers for them either. And eventually, they found other channels to sate their appetite. His desire for flesh only increased. Long-dead corpses no longer satisfied him. The fresher, the better. A neighbor died, one of our few, actually. We were the people closest to her, an old lady who had no more relatives or close friends to worry about. We found her just as life was leaving her. He dropped to his knees and feasted on her while she was still alive. He looked happy, the happiest I've seen him for a long time. The euphoria on his face while he consumed her. I knew at that moment where things would end. I want you to know that I loved him until the end. I cooked up the last remains of the hiker, seasoned it, and prepared us a Valentine's dinner. Of course, mine was pork instead. His was laced with drugs. It should be enough. At least, I hoped it would be. As the night continued, he was completely oblivious to what was coming. He kept telling me how much he loved me, appreciated me, valued me, and deep down, he was still the man I married and loved. How could I do this to him? I wouldn't let the house take him. I wouldn't let her take him. We sat in front of the fireplace. His head rested on my lap and I tenderly stroked his hair. With a mouthful of wine, I smiled to myself. His eyes closed. I leaned down to kiss him a final time and felt his heart rate begin to fade. Before finally, it came to a stop and his body went limp. That house, it had ruined everything we had and shared together. I had left the house as it was, a place I swore I would never return. But I was determined. I looked back at him as I reached the doorway and smiled softly. Nothing could distract or persuade me away from this. I walked straight to the garage and lifted up a large bottle of gasoline, a matchbox, before I drove back to that haunted house. That house that had ruined everything. It looked even worse than it did last time. It was boarded up, the garden overgrown with a mess of weeds. There was graffiti on the walls, and that eerie emptiness. I stared up at the house. She loved this house of hers, just like I loved him. And so, I would take it from her. I kicked open the door and walked straight in. I could hear the whispers of the ghosts. I could see them now. They stared at me. A little girl, a maid, an old man, and a teenage girl all stood watching me, their faces expressionless. I poured gasoline all over the furniture, the old boxes, anything and everything. As I did so, I imagined what our lives could have, should have been like. It didn't matter to me that it would hurt. Losing him hurt more. I couldn't imagine my life without him now. I looked around in hopes of seeing that woman. I lit a match in order to goad her, hoping she would appear. I saw what I'm guessing was her. I smirked and dropped the match. Immediately, the gasoline caught light and fire spread around the entire house. The smoke burned at my lungs, skin and clothes. All around me was nothing but an intense blaze. I smiled and hummed our song to myself, closed my eyes, and steadily it was becoming harder to breathe. Happy Valentine's Day. What did you think of the story? I would like to thank my guest, Innocence Unknown, for taking part. Please check him out and subscribe if you enjoyed his contribution. Don't forget to comment, stab or gently caress the like button, share it around, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This video was made with the support of my Patreons. Stay safe, my little Spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.